in your email, on the website for upcoming hot talks. I also want to let everyone know, the lawyers in the room, that there is a CLE form going around that you can sign and you can receive an hour of CLE credit for today. Today we have Craig Cobb, who will be our moderator. He is part of our Thought Leadership Committee here at the CMBA. So I will turn it over to Craig to get started. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Bar Association. By way of disclaimer, I'm not an expert on gun laws, nor do I practice in this area. I'm here because I recently confided in someone that I got my concealed carry license a couple of months ago, but I'm not carrying today. I'd like to introduce our panelists here. First, I think everyone knows Judge Joan Sonnenberg. She's a graduate of Cleveland State University and then Cleveland Marshall College of Law. The judge was in private practice from 1988 to 2005, where she handled over 1,000 matters, most of those criminal, and she had some very high-profile criminal clients. In 2005, she was appointed to the Cleveland Municipal Court by Judge Taft when there was a vacancy, and she stood for election and won the election as a Republican, which is very difficult to do in the city of Cleveland. And since 2009, she's been serving and doing a great job there. She also presides over the Recovery Court, a specialized docket supervising people with drug addiction and trauma. I understand this is the first docket of its kind in Ohio, so everyone, if you'd welcome Judge Sonnenberg. Seated to her right is Michael Walker, who is a graduate of The Ohio State University. And for more than 30 years, he's been dedicating his life to addressing youth and gang violence as the executive director of the Partnership for Safer Cleveland. He may not remember this, but I first met him on a WBIZ show on gang violence back in the 90s, back when I was a kid and so was he. So he's the executive director for the Partnership for Safer Cleveland, an organization that's been working to make our community safer by providing developmental opportunities for young people through collaborative educational and program initiatives. He also is the project director for the United States Attorneys Stand Together Against Neighborhood Crime Every Day, STANCE, which is a program that was started by the U.S. Attorney's Office to target specific high-risk neighborhoods in Cleveland to promote community-wide solutions to combat and prevent gang violence. And then last but not least, the person that stepped into the lion's den, I'm assuming, is Joel Cheney. He's a graduate of Cleveland State University with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and he currently works as an engineering and technology specialist for a firm that provides technical services for NASA Glenn Research Center. When he's not engaged in his day job, he's a well-known competitive shooter and concealed carry instructor, who I understand counts among his many clients, some lawyers and judges. I'm not one of them. And let's welcome him to this line. And before I turn it over to the panelists, I thought a little background, at least in respect to Ohio laws on firearms, might be worth addressing. And Ohio's Constitution, first adopted in 1802, has recognized the constitutional right to bear arms, similar to what our national Constitution has. I was surprised to learn that in 1859, the Ohio legislature enacted a law banning the carrying of concealed weapons. In 1974, that law was modified to allow for the affirmative defense to the charge of carrying a concealed weapon if you could prove circumstances under which a reasonable person would justify being armed. In 2004, the Ohio legislature legalized concealed carry for persons 21 years or older. And in 2006, the Ohio legislature passed a bill, Revised Code 9.68, that preempted local communities from having or passing restrictive gun laws, such as Cleveland once had, that placed various restrictions on what type of firearms could be possessed, prohibited the sale of assault weapons, prohibited the possession of assault weapons, required the registration of handguns, and placed restrictions on open carry. And the city of Cleveland challenged that law, and the Ohio Supreme Court released a decision in 2010 which basically said that local communities cannot place any restrictions on gun laws that goes against state law. And I think it's fair to say that since then, depending on your point of view, the gun laws have become less restrictive or more liberal. And what's happened in Ohio since 2008, 2010 also mirrors what's happened on the national stage with the Ohio Supreme Court and with the United States Supreme Court and a couple of 4 to 5 decisions back in 2008 and 2010 recognizing that states and local communities could not place any restrictions on gun laws. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. Mike, are you going first?
Good afternoon. What I'd like to do is just take a moment to kind of frame the conversation. I want to thank the Bar Association for having this talk. I think that one of the issues that is really important is that the theme of this particular presentation is about creating safer communities and the notion of guns in our community or in schools. But I really want to talk about a basic understanding. Just take a couple of minutes. There needs to be an understanding there's a difference between being safe and feeling safe. No matter what, we deal with the realities of what's real and perceptions. And how you feel about those matter. To feel safe, free from harm or hurt. Feeling safe. My point, Joe, is that if emotionally, not just physically, if you feel unsafe, you're not safe no matter what we say, no matter what the numbers are. And I would argue, no matter what you have to protect you, if you do not feel emotionally, physically safe. I say these things because we recognize that if you do not feel safe, and this is something you have to answer yourself, is really the question of developmentally for young people, for adults, for all of us, feeling safe is definitely a major need to fully develop and grow. And so the question of guns and the understanding of guns in our society is correct. We have the right. We have a constitutional right. And what I would just say to you is that as we talk about this, we see a difference in our country compared to other countries around the world. This is not to say we need to change, it's just facts. As you look at the chart, it gives you an idea how our country stacks up against others. And there are many stats that give you a similar picture. If you look at the chart to your left, bottom line is the United States compared to other nations, and we even have a comparison by states. My point to you all, though, is that no matter how you look at this, we have in America a feeling of not feeling safe. And we have to do things to deal with that. And so one of the examples has been legislatively. This graph talks about Connecticut before Newtown and after Newtown. And one of the issues that we have to figure out is how do we balance some of these challenges. One of the things that's been done is that in Connecticut, when they use a legislative measure to make a change to still allow gun ownership, it reduced homicides and suicides. Similarly, in the state of Missouri, they repealed those things and homicides and suicides increased. And then finally, Ohio, as we look at this, you can see again in other states that when you do certain measures, you can see a reduction in homicides, suicides, and other crimes. As we consider to have this conversation, the last thing we'll just say is, how does Ohio stack up with the rest of the United States? And this chart just basically shows you, in comparison, the numbers percentage-wise of how Ohio stacks up against the rest of our country. My point is simple, that as we have this conversation, we need to find the middle. Where do we find the common ground? We all want to feel safe and be safe. We all know that there's a right to own and carry under circumstances in this country. And so hopefully today our conversation will further that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Joel.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Cheney. I want to thank everybody for this event. Let's fill in a little bit more about me. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I'm also an NRA certified instructor. I make my own ammo. I shoot competitively every week in a pistol program. I'm a trustee at a local range. I own a good selection of handguns and rifles, including several AR-15s, and I'm also a gunsmith. I'm actually well versed in the gun laws of Ohio because something I need to teach in my concealed carry classes, which you've been through. You know they taught you some law, didn't they?
A little bit.
A little bit of law, yeah. I've instructed children, ex-military, judges, attorneys, prosecutors. I've also instructed business owners and managers, and even school teachers in the proper use of firearms. So I've taken people that know nothing, and I've taken people that know quite a bit, and taught them how to use firearms. I'm a staunch believer of the Second Amendment, and including the not allowing any infringement on that. I have other activities that I also like to do. I'm also a radio operator, and I've worked with the FBI, FEMA, Homeland Security, and other officials at the RNC and other local events. I have about 30 different FEMA certifications that go with my radio operation, and I give back to Cleveland when we have like the Rite Aid Marathon. I'll be actively working in that event. But let's get on to the point of why we're here. I want to talk about prevention of school violence in the schools. First of all, I know that the NRA, Buckeye Firearms, and I really care about school safety and students and the other soft targets that are out there. I'm going to find the first slide. Okay, but so the first thing I know that there's about 1 in 6 people that have a concealed carry license in the state of Ohio, and of those people, many of them have kids in school. So the very first thing I teach, besides the safety of firearms, is I want parents to know, lock up your guns. If you're not using your firearms, lock them up. And that one position would stop somebody like an Adam Lanza or other school shootings that have stolen firearms to do their bad deeds. So, okay, don't have that in. Third thing I want you to know is the Buckeye Firearms program that they have is called FASTER. It's a Faculty Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response Program. And the FASTER is designed to save lives and was created shortly after the Sandy Hook event. When it comes to having an active shooter or even active killer, it doesn't even have to be guns. It can be a guy with a knife running through the schools. The time that it takes to stop that person and get him to stop what he's doing, that is the faster saves lives. It doesn't replace the professionals. It doesn't say that everybody has to do it. But if we can agree that if we can stop the person in the first minute, it's going to save some lives. And I have a couple different stats. The average school killer with a knife, with a gun, whatever, that person's going to take out 5 to 7 students per minute. And something like Virginia Tech, that person averaged about 12 people a minute that he was hurting and killing. And if I find my next slide, let's take a look at the Sandy Hook event here, okay? Adam Lanza killed his mom and stole her rifle and some other guns. Went to the school at 9:35. By 9:39, somebody had figured out that he had broken out the glass door and was in the school. And within that first 39 seconds, he's killed 2 people. By 9:36:06, the dispatcher broadcast the shooting at Shees, which is the Shees is the Sandy Hook Elementary School. That's 28 seconds. That is amazing 911 response. From that time, the 9:37:38, the Connecticut State Police is dispatched. They get the call to go to the Sandy Hook school. That's a minute and a half. In that minute and a half, there's another 8 people have been shot. At 9:39, the first Newtown police arrives at the school. That's another minute and a half, and an additional 8 people have been shot in that school. At 9:39:13, 2 more Newtown officers arrive at Sandy Hook. But in that time that they arrived, 8 more students have been shot. And at 9:40 and 3 seconds, the last shot that was heard a minute later was the shooter himself, and so that's another person that was shot. In total, there was 27 people that died that day, including the shooter. And the Newtown police entered the school at 9 minutes and 47 seconds after the event started, when really the event was over and at 9:40, because the shooter took himself out. And this is what I'm trying to illustrate, is the faster saves lives. If we have a person, a staff person in the school, whether it be a teacher or a janitor or a principal, and they can stop this active killing in the schools. Say if we stopped at 9 minutes and 37 seconds, you've only got 10 people that are hurt instead of 27. And then part of the faster saves lives is not only teaching staff and teachers how to stop these situations, but also to give medical help in those people that have had a slice or a gunshot. If a person's hit in the leg and it hits an artery, that person is in need of medical attention within 3 minutes, or he's dead. With the faster saves lives, not only do we train students, or I'm not train students, but train staff in how to stop an active killer, but also raise medical attention to all those people around them with some basic trauma kits that can extend the lifetime out to the 30 minutes that it's going to take for the people, the professionals that come in the door. So, you know, if you're working with a school system and they're depending on outside help, even if we have 4 minutes, which is from the time the police are called to they go in the door, 4 minutes, you're looking at 20 people on average that are going to be hurt. It could be even less than that, it may be 10, but that's a long 4 minutes to wait and have nobody help you in a school. So, next thing I also want to cover, AR-15s, the AR does not stand for assault rifle. It actually is a manufacturer of the rifle, and that is the Armalite rifle. They make, not only do they make a model called the AR-15, they make AR-10 platforms, they make other handgun platforms. There's another term that goes around, assault rifle. And let's see if I can get my slide to go with me. This is the FASTER program, and I can come back to that. And get my, maybe over, there we go. This is the Armalite manufacturer. Okay, assault rifles. Just looking at this, which one of these is an assault rifle? Anybody have a guess? Go ahead. A little interactive here.
B. All of them.
All of them? B. Actually, the unique thing about this is the answer is yes, all of them can be assault rifles, and none of them can be assault rifle. An assault rifle is a rifle that shoots automatically with one trigger pull, it will fire off many rounds. A semi-automatic firearm is you have to pull the trigger every time. All of these firearms up here can be semi-automatic in nature and only fire off one round with one trigger pull. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Judge Sandberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is nice to see you. I see a lot of friends in here, familiar faces. I'm always happy to be here. I ask for your patience today. I have a lot of information to share. This is an emotional topic. I've known Michael Walker because we're both on this committee that you heard about, STANCE, through the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is about community safety. I do come to you from the Common Pleas bench, where I've served, as you've heard, for a while, civil and criminal cases, and of course the specialized docket as we try to respond to our community needs, the most pressing of which today are gun violence and the overdose epidemic, a fair term to use according to our county medical examiner. And as a person who lives in the city, I'm absolutely brokenhearted and sick of seeing babies, children, and innocent people caught in the crossfire. I don't know if they're assault rifles, but I know that if it's a handgun, a rifle, and I'm no expert, they kill. So they're assault rifles, assault pistols, assault handguns, they're deadly weapons, they kill people. And I've been with kids that are young teenagers that are absolute experts in firearms, but they probably can't multiply 2 times 2. Every day, including today, on the bench, I have people who come in front of me with gun cases, okay? This is not uncommon. And the answer that I get every single day about why you're carrying a gun is a predictable response: protection. And protection from what? From other people who carry guns. So while I understand that there are band-aids and responses to gun violence, I really believe we have to go organically and try to fix this culture of using guns to settle disputes. I am so sick of it. So Michael's heard me vent. I've been in this committee with him, I don't know how many years, whatever. He, poor guy, I have a cell phone, I can speed dial Michael, and I can always tell him what I'm really feeling about things. And you know, when you leave the job every day and you see this type of thing, you react. And so I said to Michael, what are we gonna do about this? And at our stance committee, which is about 40, 50 people, we meet once a month over at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Michael said, we need to listen to people who are really in the mix. And I said, well, I happen to office with a bunch of them because my office is the same building as Cuyahoga County Jail. And maybe we can, if you want to find people who are in the mix of gun violence, maybe we can go into the jail and listen. So that was about a year ago when the listening tour began. And since then, on pretty much a monthly basis, I've been into different correctional facilities to listen to children, men, and women, many of whom are charged with gun violence. And I want to share with you what I've learned. I'm not an expert. I'm a lawyer of 30-some years. I'm a former social worker in the county jail. I know I was introduced as a Republican. I don't identify myself with any particular party. I'm here to talk about what I see in the community. And this is not a political thing. Judges don't make political positions, but I see people every day. And to me, this is very much about people. And I want to say one thing about schools. I'll tell you this from the outset. When I've gone into correctional facilities, everybody has guns. And the correctional facilities, although they are county facilities, are grossly overrepresented by African American people who are poor, they can't get out. Okay, and everybody has guns because that's how disputes are resolved. But you know where kids feel safe? School, because they know that if they have a fight in a school, there won't be a gun. That's the one place that there's screaming gun. They know if there's a fight on the streets, a beef, it's going to be settled with a gun. And the talking is weak. But I'll share with you what I've learned. So we started this listening tour. It's a very informal setting. I want to thank, in his absence, the warden of our county jail, also the juvenile court, and my partner, Gabriella Celeste from the Schubert School of Case, who's accompanied me on a number of these tours. I also want to recognize Charles C., who many of you may know. He's in our audience today. He ran community reentry for 40 years. He's involved in every single community task force, committee, subcommittee, name it. He is an absolute treasure in our community and a person that I hold in the absolute highest regard. Thanks for being here, Charles. So let me tell you what I learned. I go into the penitentiary, I go into the schools, go into the juvenile system, go into these settings in a pod. I sit in the middle, just very casually. I don't ask for any last names, don't have to tell me the charge. I don't wear a robe, and there's a person to find out what's happening in our community. As we sit here right now, 12:25 on a beautiful day, right now, there are several thousand people within walking distance who are sitting in jail, and I'm not passing judgment on what they did or didn't do. I'm talking about what we see. And what we see right now is such a fracture in families. We see the kids that are telling me at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, you need to go and educate little kids because they need to know you got to have a gun, because if you don't have a gun, that's dangerous. Well, I think it's time to figure out a different way to really change the culture of how disputes are resolved, not with killing each other. I'll go into a pod of 25, 30 kids where every single person has been shot at. Okay, and this resolution of dispute this way, in my estimation, call me a dreamer. I think it's got to change. I think it's got to change. But there's so much pressure on kids today. And I heard the term about trauma kids. When I think of trauma, I think about some kid who's sitting in jail at the age of 15, who at the age of 5 witnessed somebody in his family being murdered, never dealt with that trauma, and is here today because they have been disenfranchised. The streets are always there. You go to the street, you're going to get what you need. And yes, there's basic needs like you heard from Michael. Safety, love, affection. And if you don't get it at home, you're going to get it someplace else. And kids will turn to the streets. So the kids are collectively depressed. They look like robots. But the older they get, the more they look like they're sitting in sort of a college dorm because they're getting a little too acclimated. But they are lonely, they are bored. We've really strived, you'll hear more about this today, to do something about that. And again, please don't confuse this with me being like some soft on crime. It's not. But the people who are in jail, in large part, will get out one day. They are in our community. I care about this community, and I hope that there is change. When I send the deprivation of liberty, I don't want you to go there and watch how we can make you suffer. That's not what it's about. Human dignity matters. So I see these kids collectively. I'm not a shrink. I'm not, with all due respect to people in the mental health field, although I preside over dockets with people who are diagnosed with that. These kids are depressed. I mean, I think that that's simple to see. Very low expectations on themselves. Desperate need for male role models. Why is there the gun violence? Number one cause of it, beefs. What's a beef? Who knows? It could be your mother's friend. You don't even know. You could be on the wrong street. You could be with the wrong people. But gun violence is how people resolve these disputes. The young guys follow the older guys. So what's the example? Look at that 15-year-old. He's got a gun. He's got a nice belt. I want to be like him. And so those are the examples that are emulated. And the people that I've seen, I've listened to several hundred people by now. The weak are preyed upon. So if you get robbed or you're on social media and you're on the losing end, you've just turned yourself into a dog or other words that are referred to, and you're going to get further preyed upon. Why do some people commit crime? Because they want to get to school safely. How do you like that? School is considered one safe place. One kid told me, I got straight A's. I got busted for stealing a car because I couldn't take the chance of safe passage to school. Those are my words, safe passage. He said he couldn't walk down the street without worrying about getting shot. And these kids told me, I've been hurt my whole life. You know, this one kid said to me, you know, God bless you, we're like dinosaurs. I said, what do you mean? He said, we're trying not to be extinct. Another kid said, I've been hurting since the womb. And they will say to me, like, nicely, respectfully, and by the way, no one refused to talk. They'd still be talking if I didn't have to leave after a couple hours. And they just, you know, they try to say respectfully, how can you understand my experience? You have a different experience, you're old, you're white, you're female, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you know, we're trying to understand your experience because the experience is similar and it is profound. And I don't think we can turn a blind eye without paying attention to why this is happening, not just how we respond by doing more of the same. I mean this with total respect to everybody on this panel. There's consequences, no doubt, and I'm talking about different kind of gun laws. You use a gun to commit a crime, you're going to go to prison. And we have these conversations, and although I don't ask about their cases, you know, kids will tell me, hey, listen, it's worth the consequences. I'm going to get a gun. And some would tell me very openly, you didn't ask me my name, but when I get out, I'm going to get a gun. And these are not people who have a carry concealed. These are people who get guns on the street for $200 in 10 minutes, okay? They can get a gun. They can get a gun right now. And as far as AK, this and that, I don't know. But I just finished a case with 10, 12 co-defendants, and I saw the pictures, the social media, Instagram posts, whatever. These kids are carrying those kinds of guns, those kinds of AR whatever, in these pictures saying things like, hey, no filter, no filter. I'm going to get your granddaddy, this kind of thing. That's what we're dealing with. This culture of guns are cool. Guns resolve disputes. Then one kid said to me, I got shot. I never knew how much it hurt. He said, you know, we got to tell kids when you get shot, it really hurts. Another kid chimed in, we don't understand the consequences of gun violence. We don't get it. Oh, but we understand what happens when somebody gets shot and killed. A vigil. The news shows up and everybody stands on a front lawn and feels bad. And what happens the next day? That is forgotten. Social media, it is a catalyst. There's a lot of competition. There's competitive shooting, and I'm not talking about at the range. I've heard that disputes are resolved by the better shots. And, you know, back to Michael's point, people in jail want to get out, but when they get out, and people are getting out right now, I ask yourselves, where are they going? What are they eating? What are they doing? Who is caring for them? This is not soft on crime. This is smart on community. This is simple, basic humanity. And with Charles C., and anybody here who's interested, I know Michael, well, you volunteer for me for everything, so I'm volunteering you for this one. But I do want more of like a human dignity campaign. I go to a pod and sit down with 27 guys who look like they haven't taken a shower in a week. And I know it's not the Ritz, please, I've heard all that stuff before. It's not hug and thug. Please don't even think like that. This is about human decency. When somebody gets out of jail, as people do every single day, and in this country, out of prisons, the population of equivalent of Baltimore are released from prisons every year. Okay, we incarcerate like nobody. So we have a huge gun violence problem. We also have a huge incarceration problem. We have 2 million people in prison right now. So is the response to let's build more prisons and put guns in schools? You know, that's for you to answer. You got kids in jail who have kids at home. Like when I get out of here, I know one thing, I gotta get diapers. What are you gonna do? What do you think I'm gonna do? If I need it, I'm gonna get it. Then there's the issue about law enforcement, and unfortunately, the perception of a whole fractured historical relationship is gone. What we do here is that if police officers came from a community that they patrol, it would be helpful. That they could relate to kids, and kids don't get it. Like this cop, every time he sees me, thinks I have a gun. I said, "Well, but you had a gun the first time." "Oh, but that's not fair." But they're kids. You know, they think like kids. By the way, 18 doesn't turn somebody into an adult. I was heartened to see on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago Oprah Winfrey talking about trauma-informed care. And while I started this listening tour with Michael to learn about gun violence, we can't turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to what we're hearing. And that is that there are a lot of people there in tremendous need, and when they get out, they need an exit strategy. Their advice to their siblings: live in the moment. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust your family. Loyalty above all. I said, to whom? They said, to yourself. But they also talked, well, you know, we get to a place of hope. And I got to believe there's solutions. Increased programs, having male role models. A lot of the kids in the neighborhood carry guns because they want to protect their little sisters from male predators. But I have to tell you that we do have hope. I believe the system needs to be held accountable. And thank you for your time. They told me to hurry up.
Respectful. Okay, we're going to open it up for questions. Someone floating around with a microphone. We don't need one. Okay. I'm sure someone's got to have a question. Yes, sir.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. My name's Kevin Cronin. I'm an attorney in Midtown, do criminal defense as well as juvenile, and I see it all over the place. I want to start. I wonder if the representative from the gun community wants to make a minor correction, because you said that if you took, if parents locked up guns, this would end. What I think is more accurate is if parents locked up guns, you would end one route to a gun for a kid. But there may be many, many others that might also have deadly consequences. And so I wonder if that is a more correct way of summarizing what you were describing.
Yes, definitely. You know, as our judge here said, there's lots of firearms out there. A lot of them are stolen, and if we enforce the laws that are on the books, and we could try and reduce that. Also, having the legal age of ownership for any firearm is 18. If you have a 15-year-old that owns a firearm, how come doesn't have that removed and dealt with harshly on that?
I would imagine we'd love to have that happen. You used an example. The example that was used, though, was Connecticut, and I wonder if we might shift gears and look towards Florida, where, in fact, the individual who was the shooter had every legal right to the guns he was using. He had no criminal record. He had a very troubled mental health history, but the police said that that's not actionable as long as he has not stolen the gun. He is eligible to buy the gun, and he did so, and he retabbed. Now, I wonder if there's a legal solution to that. In some of the states, there are about 5, now maybe 7. Recently, Maryland passed a law that goes by the kind of name red flags law that allows law enforcement or family members, if they feel threatened, to go to a court and ask for a restraining order to remove guns from somebody who might be a threat to themselves, suicide, you cited frequently, or to others. And they would take a gun away on a temporary basis and offer mental health services. And that this has been some sort of tool of reducing suicides and shooting. And I'm wondering if that's some sort of common ground that might do something to try and take guns away. There are groups that are trying to push that in the legislature, and maybe there's some hope of in Ohio. Even even the Attorney General has said that he might look to something like that as a solution. The governor said he might look to it as a solution. Many Democrats in the House and Senate have introduced legislation to that effect.
Well, unfortunately, the way I understand law, and I'm not an attorney, but for there to be a punishment, you have to do something. And you have to do something against law. You can't punish a person before they do something. That's why I understand the law.
It's been working in a number of states already. And Connecticut has 20 years of experience with something like this. But I'll defer to anybody else. I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. No, thank you. Other question, comment?
I do. Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Well, Kevin, I think is speaking about not necessarily a punishment, but a solution. For instance, with all the overdoses here, if you overdose and don't die, Cleveland police may not charge you with possessing drugs. They may try to get you into detox right then and there. So sometimes you have to strike while the iron is hot. And right now, to reduce these issues, I think anything that is where we respond quickly when we have somebody's attention and do what we can as a community, it doesn't necessarily have to be punitive. And that's where committees like STANS come in. That's where the opiate task force comes in, working in collaboration with law enforcement and other social service agencies to say, we want to target people who are in trouble. It doesn't have to be where everything is about punishment. It also has to be some restorative, rehabilitative, identifying where people are coming from and doing something about it.
I would just like to say, and again, that give a chance to everyone, is that we really need to find common ground. So some states, depending on where you are, have looked at red flagging from the perspective of being preventive, and then also referring for nurturance, whether that's mental health, whether that's all dealing with domestic violence issues, but there's a myriad of concerns. And the reality is we never have the conversation because they end up being extreme. There is no or yes. And we got to find the middle. And so that's an excellent point. It's been done in a number of states. Every state is different. The one thing that makes this difficult is Ohio needs to deal with Ohio. I'm from Alabama. And what we do in Alabama don't work here, okay? So we get that, but we really have to have this dialogue. This conversation needs to be about the various options. And as the judge said, the final piece is, you could do so much just by listening to the young people at risk, which we all are, if we really think about it, and really talk about the question is, what changes the culture?
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of discussion has been lately around the ability to modify guns to turn them into automatic weapons, and whether that aspect, not the gun itself, but that aspect should be criminalized. And
It is.
Or as from there, like how do we enforce it and keep it punished? Because we don't, to Judge Jennifer's point, we don't want to just throw people away in jail and just say, hey, we're treating the problem, which is that you have this, as opposed to the symptoms that led you to feel like you needed to take this extra step beyond just the weapon.
That's why gun dockets exist. And Cuyahoga County is talking about doing that. They have been for some time, but recently a commitment was made that one would exist within the next 9 days. That was made, I believe, at the Greater Cleveland Congregation. And that's where it is styled after something like a specialized docket, like a drug court, where you close monitoring, see the judge a lot, see a treatment team a lot, respond, and if you do well, you can have positive outcome and not be sanctioned. I think that's a great question. Yes.
Thank you. I saw a question.
Yeah, my name is David Arnold. I'm like Joel. I'm an NRA firearms instructor. Unlike Joel, I am an attorney, and I do a lot of family law. I'm retired now, but I'm still working quite a bit, a couple of days a week in the courts. I was in juvenile court yesterday, and courts work tomorrow.
Some retirement.
Call my retirement. But anyhow, I have been carrying a gun. I was the first in line in Geauga County in 2004 on Friday, Good Friday, the law first went into effect because our esteemed sheriff at the time, McFall, would not honor the state laws, and I had to sue him, so you could go to a joint county to get your permit. So I went to Geauga County, ended up in Portage County because the computer broke in Geauga County, and they sent us for breakfast and sent us home. But I've carried a gun pretty much 24/7 of the morning. can't legally. I left my gun, my taser, and my mace in my car in the parking lot across the street from my law firm is today. But in any event, I also I've written on the subject. I have a lot of experience. In my view, the schools have to be hardened. If we're talking about making the schools safer, we have to harden them. You can't go into Olson's Jewelers in Woodmere without a uniformed police officer being on the premises, and they're protecting Rolex watches. We're not protecting our schools, and in reality, at a short-time solution that's realistic, we got to spend the money to harden the schools. That's my view. I participated in 2013 in a group out of Upper Arlington, Ohio, that involved all kinds of different people in the firearms community, from police, and sponsored by the Upper Arlington Police Department, and I have a certificate for that particular training, and we were dealing with this whole subject of what to do, and we didn't at that time think about hardening. We thought about at least trying to correct huddling under a table and hoping you don't get shot, with some active measures of instruction and help, and it didn't go very far. But my personal experience, I do train with a local police department. I'm old enough that I remember in Columbine, the police didn't go into schools, and had to shooter, you waited outside, and all that's changed, unfortunately, maybe in part when it didn't work out the way it should have. And now the officers run to the gunfire before they didn't. But the fact of the matter is, the schools, in my view, need to be hardened. We need to spend the money to harden the schools.
Okay, we can have a debate about how it's done. For example, we have banks that get robbed and they're hardened, but they can be more technology, more training, the right personnel. I don't think there's a disagreement that we need to do a better job. The question is the methodology and the approach. Rapid response. If someone's already there, you don't have to worry about the rep. They're there. Let's make sure they respond. But the reality is this has to be a holistic conversation, because hardening also means the humanware side, the reality of the shooter himself, the mindset. We got to do a bunch of things. And what I would just like to say, the goal is we need to talk about all of them instead of just focus just on a gun court or just on guns available in a building. So the conversation I hope from this is we need to do this a continual conversation and try and measure and research what's available.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I had a question. I don't know if any of the panelists have researched the guns that you're seeing, for example, Judge, in your court. Where are the kids getting the guns? I mean, what are the sources of, again, going back to, this is one way to attack the issue. Obviously, there's lots of other different ways, but is there sort of a primary source of these guns getting onto the streets, and is there something that could be, you would always suggest to stop that from happening?
The memories of the people that I serve are very short when it comes to the name of the person from whom they purchased the gun. They'll give me a first name after several questions. I got it on the street. How long did it take you? 20 minutes. I'm not kidding. So they're readily available, and I think that there's probably law enforcement who works those paths to find the people who supply it. But I know that they are readily available, and they'll tell me, where'd you get what's stolen? Is this, but $200, $250 is the going rate. I understand, very easy to get, same day type of thing. But it's the question. I do ask the question. I just don't get answers.
Yeah, unfortunately, Commander Gujell's not here from the Cleveland Division of Police, but there are numbers and statistics about where they come from. About a third are stolen, especially when we get it related to a felony offense, another crime. But again, there's a myriad of ways, and consider the numbers. But there is I guess they're now considering more opportunities for law enforcement to really track and research this process. But you're absolutely right. You can figure out sources. Stealing, selling, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, correct.
Just one thing to remember. There's 330 million weapons in the United States that we're aware of. And the technology's changing. And quite frankly, you can buy a printer that will print it. So we're like the generals always facing the last battle. I think the judge is key. What we have to do is what is causing the need for violence? Not just the cellular dispute, but the road rage. If we can find this key, then the guns are a subset. Because the thing that, for years when I had different jobs, scared me, kept me up at night. Cooking up rice. Guns are nothing compared to the grandmother that figured out from the internet how to cook rice. So I think the key to this is what is causing the amount of violence we've had in the last 10 or so years.
It's not the gun in the school that's causing the issue. It's not the knives that are causing the issue. It's the object. It's the violence that we've got to stop. It's not the object. If you think about it, we're hearing all the time in the news, gunshot this, car drove over people this, knives cut people this. I even know a person in the audience that in her class when she was in school, a student killed another one with a pencil. So are we going to outlaw pencils? Or are we going to take care of the violence?
Yes, sir. We'll get to you next.
Okay.
Sorry.
There's many factors that come into the equation that Judd and Michael were talking about. One of them is,
Speak up a bit.
one of the problems is an overabundance of weapons. We as a society don't need the number of weapons. And the pen is, I like to compare statistically how many people were killed with a pen versus how many people have been killed with a gunshot. I don't mean to be offensive, sir, but I don't think that is a good argument at all.
How about people get driven over by cars?
How about this?
How about we see that number in the month?
How about the statistics? Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm going to copy this gentleman.
Yes, patiently waiting. Thank you. It is my understanding that from an earlier comment, concealed carry has been in the state of Ohio since 2004.
That's right.
Can somebody tell me if it's had a positive or negative effect on our crime rates and deterrence of crime?
In Ohio,
Yeah.
I doubt that there's any statistic that's going to tell you that. I read a statistic recently that people have annually utilized firearms, not necessarily fired them, not necessarily even presented them, but had some positive effect, and that was put at, and this was a CDC study that was never published, but that was put at 2.7 million times that the ability to have a defensive weapon has prevented an attack or a crime. And I don't know that you're going to get much locally that's going to be that kind of a statistic. We all look at rates for various kinds of crimes, and they go up and down, and we would love to say in the gun community that it's because, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and that's great. But, the fact of the matter is, I don't think those statistics are readily available.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
My name is Karen Giffen, and one of the things I'm hearing and the point that's being raised right now, and I really appreciate the panelists urging us to listen to one another about this very emotional topic. It's really important. But my experience is that only one side of the argument has an absolute, there cannot be any regulation. And just by way of example, it's my understanding that the Congress prohibits the CDC from doing extensive research regarding handguns and gun violence in the United States because of the NRA proposals or lobbying Congress to prevent it. My own personal view is that every single one of you are right about what it is we need to handle with respect to all of the ways in which guns operate to increase violence in our communities. But as somebody said over there, how is it? It's an impossible task when there is more than one gun for every person in the United States. It just seems, I'm overwhelmed at the idea of how long will it take us to have guns not be the response every time, or to provide mental health services to people who need it. When there are that many guns, don't we just simply need to say, there are too many, part of the solution needs to be, let's reduce them.
I would just like to give you an update on something. There has been a change recently that is allowing research to actually take place for the Center for Disease Control. And that some of the federal agencies would say to you that they're now able to do some of this issue tracking. So you're right. We need information. We need to study it. We got to find best practices. That has changed, slowly. So you've identified a very good point.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Charles C. Judge, thank you very much for those opening remarks. I really appreciate that. You know, I'm thinking you got a tree doctor, and you call a tree doctor out, and he's up in the tree looking at the fruit. And so he says, there's something wrong here. But you don't treat the fruit up there. You go down to the root of the problem, and you start to address the root of the problem. Now, I've got a friend, unfortunately, I won't be able to do his presentation justice. His name's Dwayne Destiny. And he talks about violence, gun violence as a secondary cause. And he talks about structural violence. And somebody, I think, was on the panel, they talked about the culture of violence and how we stop that, how we get at the culture of violence. Well, Dwayne talks about structural violence. He talks about poverty. He talks about redlining. He talks about infant mortality rates. He talks about economic disparities, et cetera, et cetera. He talks about depression and the environments out of which people come that experience these things that cause and perpetuate this kind of violence. And so gun violence becomes a secondary cause of the problem. So like the tree doctor, we got to drill down to the root of the problem and say, so what is causing this? Studies upon studies upon studies talk about what happens when you can successfully impact an impoverished community, remove those barriers that are there, get people healthy, get people active and part of society. You see violence reduction comes about significantly. So I'd ask us to take a look at some of the structural violence things and think about, and begin maybe to think about gun violence as a secondary cause.
Let me ask you, Mike, in the 30 years you've been doing this, is the situation getting better or is it getting worse?
It's actually getting better. And if I had the time, I would show you, but that's not the message. We sell fear. Violence, just understand this. We started a partnership with the Bar Association. It was called a Task Force on Violent Crime. Downtown Cleveland, do you remember what it was like? Remember Prospect Avenue? Okay, let me just say this to you. We still have challenges, but it's not worse. And until you have hopefulness, what you get into is a cycle where people believe it's not better, I gotta take care of it now and in the moment. But in reality, you look around our city, you tell me it's not different. It's definitely tough in some parts because of what Charles talked about, redlining, poverty, but we can do better, and yes, there's hope, and we gotta sell that message. That's not what we sell, trust me.
If I may, to Charles's point, I agree. Some of these kids that I spoke with said this is generational. You can't blame us for doing what we know. This is how it goes. This is what we've learned. Like anybody else, you grow with a family where there's a two-parent household and college is just you're going. That's it. Period. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about kids that don't have any other examples to follow. And the gun violence, I do think, is symptomatic of what's gone on. But why can't we address this? And to Karen's point, Karen, I'm overwhelmed too. I'm overwhelmed. And I think, but I don't think it's impossible to change. I really, truly don't. Because if we can, I see somebody in front of me, that's a person. And I don't have to say, I'm mad at you and you're horrible. I'm going to impose a sentence. That's what that's about. But I wish you the best. Please try to make positive change. Don't come back here. How do we stop recidivism? How do we make a person healthy? If we make a person healthy, does that make a community healthy? Why are kids resolving disputes, pulling out a deadly weapon that they don't appreciate, engaging in behavior that brings consequences they just don't understand? They can't believe they're sitting in jail, and you know what? What's going to happen when they get out? We said, we're going to give you lousy food. You're going to be hungry. There's not that much of it. If you want a snack, here's a bunch of junk food. You can't even get an apple. You can't go to, you're gonna be bored day in, day out. I don't know when you're gonna take a shower, but when you get out, you better change. So I think we really need to think about that tree, those roots. And each and every one of us can do something about it. I believe in positive change. So we have to remain hopeful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Craig. Let me say this. Michael, Charles, Your Honor, you're all correct. I just have to go back to the 1960s when I lived on 124 Otto Avenue in Glenville. We had gang violence then. I remember looking outside of my house and there were a mass of young men that had amassed on the street and were pummeling each other with probably brass knuckles, their fists, and there might have been a knife or two. One of the things that's happening in our society, and this is another root cause over the last several scores of years, is that there's been such a desensitization to the value of life. And there have been certain means of addressing grievances, and we see it in the media, we see it in movies, films, in our music, that devalues life, that suggests that the use of a firearm to resolve a dispute is okay, and it's become somewhat normalized in far too much of our society. So there are a host, there is no single answer, there's no silver bullet that can address this. You know, I'm a firm believer that if we fix what was happening in so many broken families throughout our nation, that you can ameliorate problems of poverty, violence, other socioeconomic concerns quite readily. So this goes back to some fundamental things in our society, and we see it in the dissolution of families. We see it in the fact that people become desensitized to violence. And it also manifests itself in our interactions with each other on far too regular a basis. So there's plenty of work to be done for all of us to address this. But I do hope that you, sir, don't believe that the Second Amendment is an absolute, because certainly when we talk about addressing gun violence, there has to be some concessions made on the part of the NRA and others, because I see a lack of partnership there in addressing that kind of gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to be on our subcommittee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear it. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you so much.